Hey, my name's Mason. I'm 24 and I fix cars for a living. Not the fancy kind you see in showrooms, just the beat-up sedans and rusty pickups that roll into the shop where I work the night shift just outside Portland, Oregon. It's a small garage, smells like motor oil and burnt coffee, and I'm usually elbow deep in an engine until 2 a.m. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills barely. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment, tucked in a quiet corner of a neighborhood where the street lights flicker and the sidewalks are cracked. It's nothing special. A sagging couch, a fridge that hums too loud, and a coffee maker I've had since high school. The rent's steep for what it is, and I've been scraping by since I bought the place 2 years ago. Back then, I thought owning something would make me feel like I'd made it. Instead, it just feels like a weight I carry every month. I wasn't always this way, living like the world's on mute. My dad died when I was 12, left me a toy truck keychain I still keep in a drawer. My mom remarried a few years later and moved to Seattle with her new husband. She calls sometimes, but it's not the same. I don't blame her. Life moves on. I just didn't expect to feel so stuck while it did. I tried renting out the spare room once to help with the mortgage, but the guy was a scam artist who skipped out after a month, leaving me with a busted lock and a lighter wallet. After that, I swore I'd never do it again. But money talks louder than promises. Last month, I was staring at a stack of overdue bills, the kind that make your stomach twist. So, I swallowed my pride and posted an ad on Craigslist spare room for rent quiet apartment, 600 slur month utilities included. No pets, no drama. I didn't expect much. Maybe a broke college kid or someone passing through. I just needed the cash. It was a rainy Tuesday night, the kind where the drops patter against the window like they're trying to get in. I was sprawled on the couch, half watching a rerun of some cop show, when my phone pinged an email. The subject line read, "Room for rent inquiry." I opened it expecting another spam bot or someone asking for a discount. "Hi, Mason," it said. "My name's Sophia. I'm a student looking for a quiet, private place to stay. I saw your ad and I'm interested. Could we meet in person to discuss? I can pay in cash up front?" I read it twice, straight to the point, no fluff. Something about the tone felt different, calm, almost formal, like she'd thought about every word. I replied, suggesting we meet the next day at a coffee shop nearby. She agreed, no questions asked. The next afternoon, I sat at a corner table in Lenny's Beans, nursing a black coffee that tasted more like burnt toast. The place was quiet, just the hum of the espresso machine and the clink of cups. I kept checking my phone, wondering if she'd flake. Then the door chimed and she walked in. Sophia was small, maybe 5 feet 2 inches, with long dark hair tied loosely in a braid that fell over one shoulder. She wore a plain gray hoodie and jeans, nothing flashy, but there was something about her. The way she moved like she belonged wherever she stood. Her eyes scanned the room, found me, and she gave a small nod before walking over. Up close, I caught a faint whiff of her perfume. Something soft like lavender, but not overpowering. She looked younger than I expected, maybe 28, 30 at most, with a kind of quiet grace you don't see in most people rushing through life. "Mason?" she asked, her voice, steady but soft, like she didn't need to raise it to be heard. "That's me," I said, standing up, feeling a little awkward. "Sophia, right?" She nodded and sat across from me, her hands folded neatly on the table. No phone, no fidgeting, just present. "I liked your ad," she said. "Sounds peaceful. That's what I'm looking for." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "It's not much. Just a room, a bed, a desk, shared kitchen, and bathroom. I work nights, so I'm not around much." "That's perfect," she said. "I'm studying online graphic design. I just need somewhere I can focus away from distractions." There was a pause, like she was choosing her words carefully. I didn't push. "You want to see the place?" I asked. She nodded. "If that's okay." An hour later, we were standing in my apartment. She walked through the spare room, barely bigger than a closet with a single window facing the street. She ran her fingers along the edge of the desk like she was testing it for something I couldn't see. "I'll take it," she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. 3 months up front like we discussed. I stared at the cash crisp bills more than I'd seen in a while. You sure you don't even know me? She smiled, just a flicker. I'm a good judge of character. That was it. She moved in the next day, her stuff fitting into 2 duffel bags and a laptop case. I figured she'd be like any other roommate, keep to herself. Pay on time, move on eventually. But something about her, that quiet way she carried herself, stuck with me. I didn't know it then, but that email, that meeting, was the start of something that had turned my whole world upside down. The first week with Sophia as my roommate was quiet, almost too quiet. I'd come home from the garage around 3 a.m., my hands still smelling of grease, the apartment dark, except for the faint glow under her door. Sometimes I'd hear the soft tap of her keyboard or the rustle of pages turning. She was up late like me, but we barely crossed paths. I'd leave for work before she woke up, and she'd be in her room by the time I got back. It was like living with a ghost, one who paid rent on time. Then I started noticing little things. The kitchen counter was cleaner than I'd ever left it. A new pack of coffee grounds appeared in the cupboard. The good kind, not the cheap stuff I usually bought. One morning, I found a sticky note on the fridge. Bought extra milk. Hope you like almond. It was written in neat, slanted handwriting with a tiny doodle of a coffee cup in the corner. I stared at it longer than I should have, feeling a strange warmth, like someone had turned on a light I didn't know was off. Sophia kept to herself, but she wasn't cold. When we did run into each other, she'd nod or offer a small smile, her eyes catching mine for just a second before she looked away. She moved through the apartment like she was trying not to leave a trace. Light's soft voice always closing doors gently. But her presence was there in the faint lavender scent that lingered in the hallway, in the way the dishes were stacked just so. I didn't realize how much I'd missed having someone else around until I started waiting for the sound of her footsteps when I got home. One evening, I got off work early, around midnight. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and sharp. I walked into the apartment expecting it to be dark, but the porch light was on. Sophia was sitting out there cross-legged on the old wooden bench I'd never bothered to fix, reading a book under the glow of a string of fairy lights I didn't even know we had. She looked up as I stepped outside, her braid loose and a little messy, like she'd been there for hours. "Didn't expect you back so soon?" she said, closing the book. It was some thick novel, the kind with a worn spine and tiny print. Not the usual stuff you'd see a college kid reading. "Yeah. Slow night at the shop," I said, leaning against the railing. "Didn't think you'd be out here. Don't students usually, I don't know, scroll TikTok or something?" She laughed, a soft sound that caught me off guard. "I'm not that kind of student," she said. "I like quiet things, books, drawing. Keeps my head clear." I nodded, unsure what to say. I wasn't used to talking to people who didn't fill the silence with noise. "What's the book?" I asked, mostly to keep the conversation going. She held it up, showing the cover. "Jane Eyre. Old favorite," she said. "It's about finding your own way even when the world's against you." "Sounds heavy," I said, half smiling. "I'm more of a car manual kind of guy." She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing playfully. "You should try it sometime. Might surprise you." I don't know why, but I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the porch steps a few feet from her. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, already cracking the can open. "Not at all," she said, setting the book down. "Just don't expect me to read you poetry." We talked for a while, nothing big, just about the shop, her online classes, the way Portland's rain never seemed to stop. She mentioned she'd grown up somewhere with too many expectations, but she didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. There was something about her, a weight in her voice, like she was carrying a story she wasn't ready to tell. I told her about the garage, how I'd once fixed a guy's transmission in under 3 hours, and he tipped me with a half-eaten pizza. She laughed again, louder this time, and I realized I wanted to hear that sound more often. The next few weeks, things shifted. We started sharing the kitchen more. She'd make pasta with some sauce she whipped up from scratch, and I'd bring home takeout from the diner near the shop. One night, she left a note. "Your shirt was in the washer. Folded it for you." I found it on my bed, neatly pressed, and for some reason it hit me hard. Nobody had done something like that for me since I was a kid. One night I couldn't sleep. The rain was coming down hard, drumming against the windows, and my head was stuck on memories of my dad. how he'd sit with me in the garage, showing me how to change oil his hands steady while he talked about life. I wandered into the living room restless and heard a faint sound from Sophia's room. A guitar, soft and hesitant, playing a melody. I knew it was Hallelujah, the same song my mom used to hum when I was little. When things still felt whole, I stood outside her door, not wanting to interrupt, but unable to walk away. The music stopped and the door creaked open. Sophia froze, her cheeks flushing. She was in an oversized sweater, her guitar still in her hands. "Sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you were awake." "No, it's okay," I said, my throat tight. "That song, it's my favorite." Her eyes widened just a fraction. "Really? My mom used to play it for me when I was scared. It was her way of calming me down." We stood there, the rain filling the silence. Then she stepped aside. "Want to come in? I mean, just to talk. It's late and I don't know. Feels like we're both awake for a reason." I hesitated, then nodded. We sat on her floor, her with the guitar, me with my hands clasped, and talked until the rain slowed to a drizzle. She told me about her mom, how she taught her to play, how music was her escape from a life that felt too heavy. I told her about my dad, the toy truck keychain, how I hadn't felt at home anywhere since he was gone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was talking to a stranger. I felt seen. The days after that rainy night felt different, like the air in the apartment had shifted. Sophia and I weren't just roommates anymore. We didn't put a name to it, but there was something there growing in the quiet moments. We'd cooked dinner together, her chopping vegetables while I stirred sauce, our elbows brushing in the cramped kitchen. She'd tease me about my terrible knife skills, and I'd fire back about her obsession with perfectly al dente pasta. It was easy, natural, like we'd been doing it for years. But there was always a shadow in her eyes, a flicker of something she wasn't saying. I didn't push. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready. One Saturday, I woke up to a text from her. "Can you drive me somewhere today? I need to get out of the city for a bit." It was out of the blue, but her tone felt urgent, not like her usual calm self. I replied, "Sure. Where to?" She just said, "Somewhere quiet. You pick." We ended up in my old pickup heading toward a lake about an hour outside Portland. The road was lined with pine trees, their needles catching the late morning light. Sophia was quiet at first, staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap. She'd swapped her usual hoodie for a soft green sweater, her hair loose and catching the breeze through the cracked window. The truck smelled faintly of oil and the pine air freshener dangling from the rear view mirror. I kept stealing glances at her, wondering what was going on in her head. When we got to the lake, she kicked off her sneakers and walked barefoot onto the grass, her steps light like she was shedding something heavy. The water sparkled under the sun, and a cool breeze rustled the reeds. She spun around, arms outstretched, and laughed a real unguarded laugh that made my chest ache. "This is perfect," she said, her voice bright. "Oh, nobody knows who I am. I love that." I sat on a nearby rock watching her. "You hiding from someone?" I asked, half joking, but her smile faded just enough for me to notice. "Not exactly," she said, sitting next to me, her bare feet brushing the grass. "Just sometimes you need a break from being who everyone expects you to be." I nodded, not sure what she meant, but feeling the weight behind her words. "You want to tell me about it?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. She looked at the water, her fingers twisting a blade of grass. "My family? They're complicated. My dad wanted me to be someone I'm not. Business school, corporate life, all that. I tried it for a while, but it felt like I was suffocating. So I left, started over. That's why I'm here." There was more to it, I could tell, but I didn't press. Instead, I reached out and touched her hand just lightly. "You're doing all right out here," I said. "You don't seem like someone who's running." She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. Then, without a word, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't desperate or rushed, just soft and certain, like she'd been waiting to do it. My heart thumped hard, and I kissed her back, the world narrowing to the warmth of her lips and the distant sound of water lapping the shore. When we pulled apart, she smiled a little shy. I've wanted to do that for a while, she said. Me too, I admitted, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. After that day, things changed. We stopped pretending it was just roommate stuff. She'd slip into my room some nights, curling up next to me, her head on my chest. We didn't talk about what it meant, but it felt right. I'd wake up to her sketching at the kitchen table, her hair falling over her face, and I'd feel something I hadn't in years, peace, like the jagged edges of my life were finally smoothing out. But peace doesn't last forever. It was a Thursday night about 2 months after she moved in. I was in the living room scrolling through my phone when someone knocked on the door. Hard, insistent, not the casual rap of a neighbor. Sophia was in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup, but she froze when she heard it. "I'll get it," she said, her voice tight. I stayed put, but I could hear everything. A man's voice sharp and formal. "Miss Sophia, your father's been looking for you. 2 months and you've had everyone worried sick. You can't keep living like this." I stood up, my stomach twisting. Sophia's voice was low, but I caught it. "I'm fine, Richard. Tell him I'm fine." I stepped into the hallway, and there he was, a guy in a tailored suit, probably in his 50s, standing next to a black SUV parked outside. His face was all business, like he was used to giving orders. Sophia turned to me, her eyes wide, almost pleading. "Mason, this is someone from my family." The man looked me over, his expression unreadable. "Miss Harrington," he said, ignoring me. "Your father, David Harrington, expects you to come home. This isn't a game." I felt the air leave the room. David Harrington. The name hit like a punch. Everyone in Portland knew it. Tech-millionaire, the guy whose face was on business magazines and billboards. Sophia was his daughter. The girl who made pasta in my kitchen, who left doodles on sticky notes, was a millionaire's kid. I stared at her, my head spinning. "Sophia, what's going on?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She looked at me, her face pale. "I'm sorry, Mason. I didn't lie to you. I wanted to be normal. Just for a little while." The man cleared his throat. "I'll give you a day to pack. Car will be back tomorrow." He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Sophia didn't move. Neither did I. The soup was still simmering, the smell of herbs filling the silence. "You're his daughter," I said, my voice low. "You've been living here and you didn't tell me. I didn't want you to look at me like that," she said, her voice breaking. "Like I'm some rich girl playing pretend. I just wanted to be Sophia, not a Harrington." I shook my head, anger and hurt mixing together. "You didn't trust me enough to tell me who you are." "It wasn't about trust," she said, stepping closer. "It was about me. I needed this. I needed you." I didn't know what to say. The room felt too small, the walls too close. All I could think was that the girl who'd brought light back into my life was someone I didn't really know at all. The morning after that man showed up, the apartment felt wrong. The air was heavy, like the silence after a storm when everything's too still. Sophia didn't come out of her room. I heard her moving around, the soft shuffle of clothes, the zip of a bag, but the door stayed closed. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the cold coffee in my mug, the steam long gone. I wanted to knock, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What do you say to someone who's been living in your home, sharing your space, your life, and turns out to be someone else entirely? By noon, she was gone. No goodbye, no note, just the faint creak of the front door as it closed behind her. I walked into a room half expecting to find her still there, sketching at the desk or curled up with a book, but it was empty. The bed was made, the desk cleared, not a trace of her left. Except for one thing, a keychain hanging on the doorknob. It was a small toy truck, faded red plastic, the same kind my dad gave me when I was a kid, the one I'd told her about during one of our late-night talks. I'd mentioned it once, how it was the last thing he gave me before he got sick. How I kept it in a drawer because it hurt too much to look at. She'd remembered. I picked it up, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to be angry, to hate her for lying, for slipping into my life and turning it upside down. But I couldn't. She hadn't lied. Not really. She just left out the part where she was Sophia Harrington, daughter of a billionaire. Someone whose world was so far from mine it might as well be another planet. I didn't hate her. I missed her. And that hurt worse. The next few days were a blur. I went back to my routine work, sleep, repeat, but it wasn't the same. The garage felt colder, the hum of the engine's louder grating. I come home to a dark apartment. No faint glow under her door. No scribbled notes on the fridge. The kitchen smelled of nothing now. No lavender, no simmering pasta sauce. I stopped sitting on the porch. It reminded me too much of her. Of that night we talked under the fairy lights, her laugh filling the quiet. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts, staying until the sun came up, anything to keep my mind off the emptiness. One night, I drove past the lake where we'd gone that day, the place where she'd laughed and kissed me like nothing else mattered. I didn't stop, couldn't. The memory was too sharp, like a blade I didn't want to touch. I kept driving the toy truck keychain in my pocket, my fingers brushing against it every time I reached for my keys. I didn't know why I carried it. Maybe because it was all I had left of her. I thought about her more than I wanted to admit. Who was she really? The girl who doodled on sticky notes, who played Hallelujah on a guitar at 2 a.m. Or the eyes who'd run away from a life most people would kill for. I wondered if she'd gone back to her father's world, to mansions and boardrooms, to a life where someone like me didn't belong. I didn't Google her. I didn't want to see her face on some glossy magazine cover, smiling in a way that wasn't meant for me. Weeks passed. The apartment stayed quiet. I stopped checking Craigslist for renters. The idea of someone else in her room felt wrong, like betraying a memory. I tried to move on, to fill the space she'd left. I bought a new coffee maker, hoping the smell of fresh grounds would drown out the ache. Didn't. I fixed the creaky porch bench, sanding it down until my hands ached. But every time I sat on it, I saw her, their book and hand hair catching the light. I didn't hate her for leaving. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. She'd needed a break, a chance to be someone else, and I'd been part of that. But knowing that didn't make the quiet any easier to bear. I'd spent years alone before her, content in my solitude. Or so I thought. Now alone felt different. It wasn't just the absence of people. It was the absence of her. The way she'd made my life feel full without trying, like a song you don't realize you love until it stops playing. I kept the keychain on my nightstand, not in the drawer where I'd hidden it for years. It was a reminder not of my dad this time, but of her. Of how for a little while I'd felt like I wasn't just surviving. I felt alive. 3 weeks after Sophia left, the apartment felt like a shell. I'd gotten used to the quiet again. Or at least I told myself I had. Work kept me busy. Long nights at the garage, the hum of engines drowning out my thoughts. I'd come home, collapse on the couch, and stare at the ceiling until sleep took over. The toy truck keychain sat on my nightstand, catching the light every morning. A small reminder of something I wasn't ready to let go. I didn't know if I was waiting for her or just waiting for the ache to fade. Either way, life moved on, slow and steady like it always did. Then, on a gray Thursday morning, everything changed again. I was checking the mailbox, expecting the usual bills and junk flyers. When I saw it, a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name written in that same neat, slanted handwriting I'd seen on her sticky notes. My hands froze. I stood there, the cold metal of the mailbox against my fingers, the air smelling faintly of wet leaves from last night's rain. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded once and a key. Not just any key, a spare to my apartment, the one I'd given her when she moved in. My heart thudded as I unfolded the letter. Her words were simple, deliberate, like she'd written them a dozen times before getting it right. Mason, I've never been good at goodbyes, so I didn't give you one. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for not telling you who I was. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to be someone else for a while. Someone who didn't carry the weight of my last name. You gave me that peace, a place to breathe, a reason to laugh. I hate the world I come from, all the expectations and empty promises. But if there's one person who makes me want to step back into the real world, it's you. I don't know what this means or if you even want to see me again, but if you don't mind, I left my room empty. The key is yours to decide what to do with. Sophia. I read it twice then, 3 times, standing there in the chilly morning air. The key felt heavy in my hand, cold and solid, like it held more than just the ability to unlock a door. I walked back inside the letter, still in my grip, and sat at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, but for the first time in weeks it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting like I was. I thought about her, about the nights we'd spent talking, the way she'd made my life feel full without trying. I thought about the lake, her barefoot in the grass, the way she'd kissed me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thought about the man in the suit, the life she'd run from, and how she'd chosen my rundown apartment over all of it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just hopeful. And that scared me more than anything. I didn't call her. I didn't know her number. She'd never given it to me, and I hadn't asked. I didn't drive to the lake or check the news for her father's name. Instead, I put the key on the counter next to the coffee maker and went to work. All day under the hood of a busted Chevy, I kept seeing her handwriting, hearing her voice in my head. I kept thinking about what it meant to have someone choose you, not for what you have, but for who you are. That night, I sat on the porch, the same bench where we'd talked under the fairy lights. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth. I held the keychain, the toy truck, and turned it over in my fingers. I'd spent years keeping it hidden, a piece of my past I couldn't face. But Sophia had seen it, remembered it, and left it for me, not as a goodbye, but as a promise. She'd seen me, the real me, the guy who fixed cars and lived alone and didn't know how to let people in. And she'd chosen to stay, even if just for a little while. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe she'd come back, knock on the door with that quiet smile, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Maybe we'd pick up where we left off, cooking pasta and laughing over nothing. Or maybe she'd stay in her world, and this letter would be the last I'd hear from her. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I wasn't running from it. I stood up, the key to the apartment still in my hand. I walked to the spare room, the one she'd left empty, and opened the door. It looked the same. Bare walls, a desk, a bed, but it felt different now. It wasn't just a room, it was a possibility. I hung the key on the doorknob right where she'd left the truck keychain and closed the door gently. Then I smiled. Not for anyone else, not for some grand reason, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. Not the apartment, not the city, but in myself. Sophia had given me that, and whether she came back or not, I'd carry it with me. I keep the door open just in